Hello, friends. It is me, Egnards. I am back to talk to you about Cantina Sector 9 drop rates, more specifically, Meathead and CG. They like to screw around with me, and just when I think that I have things figured out, they decide to change the math up on us. That's right. In the last update that happened last week, CG did announce that they were changing the drop rate of signal data on Cantina 9F, and that is okay because we do have a very dedicated community of individuals who have gotten me a very large amount of data so that we can be pretty damn confident in our answer today. Now, the amount of data that we have is not enough to say this is the definitive exact drop rate. However, it is enough for us to say, hey, we've got it pinpointed down to a very minuscule factor of change, and we can draw conclusions from that information. However, there is a bit of information that no content creators ever really talk about when it comes to Cantina, when it comes to signal data. And this has been something that has been around even in the Sector 8 days. And I would like to kind of explain that phenomenon as well. I am going to ask for one favor from the community, however. This is something that has taken a lot of my time, effort, and energy. I've slept and breathed this project for the last couple of weeks, and I have put together the resources because I do enjoy what I do. If you find this useful and you are not already subscribed, please do so. And if you are already subscribed, please share this video around because the information is important. And I do know that what is going to end up happening is this stuff is going to go into somebody else's stream, and somebody bigger than me is going to share very similar information, and that's okay. I want the information shared, but let's get it right from the source. With all of that bullshit out of the way, let's get into it. For those of you that are living under a rock, there has been an entire shift in how the cantina looks over the last month, and with it, we got some new cantina battles on Sector 9. Now, two noticeable differences here are number one, that two different signal datas drop in different drop boxes, and these battles cost 20 energy. And now we can pinpoint the drop rate of these things, but that's not enough when it comes to the equation of talking about a difference in the energy cost and talking about being able to get multiple signal data. And that is where I have you covered tonight. However, as I mentioned earlier, there is one drop phenomenon that nobody really talks about, and a lot of players are confused about. You will notice down here that it says that this node drops two green signal data, and this drops two gray signal data. But that's not entirely truthful. What's actually happening here is that sometimes it drops one signal data and sometimes it drops two signal data. So when we talk about the drop rate, I don't really have a better word for it, but we're actually talking about the chance that a drop actually occurs, not necessarily the instance rate of getting something. And that does confuse players a lot. So just as an example, so that you can see here, the way that a lot of players view the drop rate for signal data is we think of it as, hey, and I'm just using a fake drop rate here, an easy drop rate. This is not the drop rate of any of the signal data, but they say, hey, there is a 90% chance of dropping a signal data, and there is a 10% chance of not dropping a signal data. And over the course of 10 battles, you are going to get 9 signal data. Uh, Maybe not over 10 battles, but maybe over 100 battles, you'll get 90 pretty consistently. But the way that the drop table actually works is a little bit more like this, right? The quantity for 0 is something like 30%, the quantity for 1 is something like 50%, and the quantity for 2 is something like 20%. And over the same number of battles, the drops are the same, And that's what we as players kind of call the drop rate, even though that's not necessarily true, because the drop rate of signal data is actually 70%, and the chance of there being no signal data is actually 30%. So the question that some of you are asking is like, well, hey, Egnard, shouldn't we put together a experiment where we track every single sim we do and record the exact so we can find out the minutia of this? And the answer is honestly probably not, because this game is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And when we look at the drops over the course of a week or over the course of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, a year, that differentiation doesn't actually matter. But it is a confusing point for a lot of players when they look at something like green signal data, which, according to Project Coruscant, a study group from a long time ago, is roughly 99% drop rate. But they see that often you are getting no drops of green signal data when you are doing one sim at a time, and wondering, like, why is that even possible? How can that even happen? And the reality is, it's because there is a chance of one dropping, there is a chance of two dropping, but there is also an increased chance of zero dropping. And this even makes sense when we talk about the white signal data, which drops over 100% of the time. There is a possibility, and I'm not 100% sure on the exacts here because we haven't tracked this, that there is a chance of getting zero signal data, but because the chances of getting the other two are so high, we don't really necessarily notice that. So, all of this is to say that when we talk about drop rates tonight, we are actually talking about occurrence rates over a longer period of time. And that is a big, big, big important detail when you are looking at your 5 sims, 6 sims, 7 sims, and being like, hey, man, what gives? So, going back to the point here, when we are talking about signal data, the idea is, should we be farming here on Sector 9, or should we be farming over back where we were before on Sector 8? As I mentioned earlier, I do have the answer, because while we do have a public facing sheet, I also have a private facing sheet that has a lot more math involved in the summary sheet, right? If you are looking at the public facing sheet, you are going to see something that looks a little bit like this, the highlighted area. You can clearly see that we have quite a bit more going on my screen, and that was for the purpose of making the infographics. One thing that I do want to highlight is that when we talk about the expected drop rates on old nodes, this is not something that I tracked myself personally. These are the numbers granted from Project Coruscant. The numbers that I used to use were a little bit lower. I was always using 131% for gray signal data, 91% for green signal data, and that same 66% for blue signal data. We are going to use these numbers just because the sample size is so high that I am inclined to believe those just a little bit more. But without further ado, this is what we are kind of looking at. When we look at Cantina Sector 8, we can see on the left-hand side what our expected drops will be over the course of 625 battles, which is 10,000 energy. And in that 10,000 energy, you are also expected to get about 6.25 Zeta drops, which may be beneficial for players who are in the mid game who are still in a Zeta crunch. However, because of the Omega battle changes, that might be alleviated soon. Now, with Cantina Sector 9, we are looking at only 500 battles, and you are looking at overall less drops per signal data, but you will see that our crystal values are consistently higher than the Cantina crystal values for Cantina Sector 8. So, as an example, you are looking at about 12,375 crystals worth of value from any battle in Cantina Sector 8, whereas you are looking at about 500 to 15,900 crystals worth of value when you go to Cantina Sector 9. You're going to still see fairly large drops of that gray signal data in all of the gray signal data nodes, and you are going to see a little bit of a lower consistency drop with the blue signal data. Now, as a note, when we talk about Cantina 9F, because I know some of you are here specifically to find out the difference, it appears that what CG has done is they have increased significantly the drop rate of the green signal data. So when CG made this change, we had the drop rate locked down for green signal data as being somewhere around 66% and blue signal data being somewhere around 48%. Right now, we are looking at a drop rate of 85% for green signal data, which is a very clear increase, and 49.91% for blue signal data. We could say that that is an increase, but more than likely, the blue signal data is exactly the same, and we're just seeing some deviation from the math that is coming through at any given amount of time. With those 500 battles, you're going to see about 3.75 Omicron drops. But again, none of this really means anything when we also consider the fact that the cost per battle is increased from 16 energy to 20 energy. And we wonder, hey, man, what is actually more efficient for me to farm? And I do have you covered there as well. And what we're going to basically look at on the left-hand side is the corrupted signal data value per 100 energy spent. You can see at the top the Cantina Sector 8 for gray, green, and blue, as well as the overall drop on 9B, 9D, and 9F. And looking at that per 100 energy spent, we are seeing a very clear increase in the efficiency of farming corrupted signal data. So Relic 10 for the end game player when you go to a Cantina Sector 9 node, with Cantina 9B being the clear winner when we want to convert for corrupted signal data. Now, the reason why that is because even though blue signal data has a higher overall scavenge rate, the drop rate is so significantly higher on the gray signal data that you are getting more per energy on that. So 9B is our clear winner if your entire goal is just to be built up on corrupted signal data. The right side of this graphic is essentially the opposite. Hey, Egnards, I need signal data. I need blue signal data. I need green signal data. I need white signal data. Tell me where I should be farming. And again, we are looking at per 100 energy spent. You can see that for gray signal data on Cantina Sector 8, you are getting about 8.25 signal data per 100 energy spent. But on Cantina Sector 9B and 9D, you are getting about 6.29 or 6.46 per battle, right? Or per energy, rather, per energy spent. For greens, that gets reduced even further, 6.19 on Cantina 8 and 3.03 on 9B, 4.25 on 9F. And for blue signal data, we're basically kind of cutting this in half. On Cantina Sector 8, you are seeing about 4.13 blue signal data per 100 energy spent, and 2.08 on Cantina Sector 9D. Man, this is like a tongue twister. 2.50 on Cantina Sector 9F. I know that for some of you, you're like, hey, none of this makes any sense to me. Egnards, please help me break it down. And essentially, this is what it boils down to. If we are specifically talking about signal data, if we are taking out of the equation that you are a mid game player who is bleeding zetas and you just need those more than anything. When we talk about signal data, if you have a short term project, you need to hit a GAC deadline. You need to get blue signal data before the Leviathan event because you don't want to miss it for another month. You have a deadline that is measured in days or weeks. You should be farming on Cantina Sector 8. It will be the quickest way to get a specific signal data. And it gets a little bit more complicated than this because when we talk about limiting factors, we can say, well, hold on a second. If gray is not my limiting factor, but blue is my limiting factor, do I want to farm blue? Or do I have to worry about farming both because they're both going to limit me? If two things are going to limit you, go to Cantina Sector 9. If you are limited by a single signal data, you are going to want to go to Cantina Sector 8. If you are an end game player, and as an end game player, your focus right now is, hey man, I got tons of servo motors. I have been building these things up forever because the eras have tripled the amount I am getting, and I have plenty of droid brains, plenty of gear to keypads. I just want to bring my teams to Relic 10. You are going to want to farm Cantina Sector 9B, right? And you are going to want to convert both of those things into corrupted signal data in order to get your Relic 10 materials. If you are just generally farming as a player, 9F is probably the best node you can possibly farm now. Beforehand, 2 weeks ago, this was not the case, even though it was the node that everybody was farming on. Right now, 9F is the de facto, I'm just farming for the sake of farming. I am farming because I always need signal data. Hit Cantina 9F, you always need blue signal data. I will acquiesce that 9D is still a really good best of both worlds node, but not quite as good as it was 2 weeks ago when 9F was not producing the same level of value. 9D does give you a slightly higher corrupted signal data rate while also still giving you as a player blue signal data. All of that is to say, we will continue the experiment. I do want to lock down exacts when it comes to these numbers, but at this point in time, I am very confident in saying this is what the picture looks like. These are the numbers that can be shared around the community. This will give players the idea that they need for farming going forward. The last thing that I do want to point out, because you did see it on my screen, but I didn't talk about it, just so that we understand the sims and the amount of data that has so far been put into this project. When we look at our battles, we are looking at 1,600 battles on 9B, 3,300 battles on 9D, and 5,600 battles on 9F. Again, this is not enough to give us exact drop rates. You are going to want data in the tens of thousands, but this is going to get us close enough where we can safely say, yes, we know what we're talking and we know what we're doing. With all of that said, again, if you have found this helpful, for once, I am going to tell you, please share the video with the people in your guild, in your Facebook groups, in your Discords, wherever you are, so that we can get this information out. And if you do enjoy this type of content, you can help me feel more motivated to do that and produce these studies by hitting subscribe and leaving a comment. But with all of that said, I do want to hear from you. I am curious about your thoughts. I am curious if there is something missing from this study that you feel like we could be doing a little bit better. Please let me know on Discord or in the comments. Peace out and have a great rest of your night.